Welcome to the Korg Volca FM review. If you don't know what the Volca FM is, it's an FM synth. So it's a digital FM synth with 3 voices available to you. It's FM kind of system. Gives you 6 operators to play with, and has 32 different algorithms available. We'll go into that a bit deeper in a sec. It can also store up to 32 different patches on it, so you can see you can either comes with 32 default patches, or you can load your own, and it actually will load in DX7 patches, which I like to take advantage of. The algorithm dial right down here lets you switch between all the algorithms available to you, but it's also got a 16-step sequencer on it that can be used, and can be triggered like that and recorded over quite simply like this. You get the idea. You can also do some cool stuff with the sequencer, such as motion sequencing. So if I hold down function here and I turn on the motion sequencing, we can turn that same sequence on. Play around with some of these dials, and you can see they'll light up when they're ringing. Sounds like rat shit, but you get the idea. So the sequencer is just quite simply a 16-step one, but with some little bells and whistles on it, with being able to use the motion sequencing to control the dials as the sequencer goes along. And also you can use active steps. So if there's a part of the sequence you don't like, or you want to change it fast, you can go ahead and enable active step by holding down function and play. And so if I hit play to hit the sequencer, if I like, that sounds awful, right? So you just still not great. But you can and you can quickly turn that off and on as you play, if you're using it for live performing or not. It's cool. So the sequencer is rather simple, but it does give you some options to play of it. All right, what else was I going to say about this damn thing? And it's designed kind of similar to a DX7, so it can load in DX7, but to various levels of success. I don't actually have a DX7 to compare it against, but people who do say it's not exactly a replica, but it gives you in the same ballpark kind of. And it also comes with a chorus effect down here that can be turned off and on. And also it does come with an ARP. So let's give the ARP a try here. To turn it on, I just have to hold down function, push ARP on, and you're going, why no ARP? Well, you also got to pick the ARP type you want. So it has rise with 3 octaves, fall with 3 octaves, and random 3 octaves. And also a division here. You may go ridiculously fast or slow it down. And also tempo to control here, which will control the tempo of your sequence and your, of course, your ARP. Anywho, who is this aimed towards? This was the first synthesizer I bought about a year and a bit ago, and so I think it lends itself nicely to new people looking to get into maybe hardware synthesis that don't want to spend thousands of dollars out the get-go. It's a relatively cheap $200 Canadian device. I do see them popping up used for even cheaper, so you can get in and play around with some hardware synths without spending a lot of dough to see if it's for you. Be warned, if it is for you, you'll probably be spending a fair bit more cash after the fact if you do fall down the rabbit hole. So I think it aims itself well towards new people looking to get into this hobby, or someone who just wants to have a hardware synth to toy around with. Beyond that, it's also a quick way to get some FM sounds on the cheap as well. So if you are a seasoned producer or you like working with hardware and you don't want to go with a VST route, but you don't want to spend a large amount of money, this is a quick way to get a 3-voice instrument that can give you some simple FM chords and deliver those classic FM, bells, sounds, and pads. Pads are a little limited with only 3 voices, but you can still get a lot of good sounds out of this thing. So honestly, I can't think of a cheaper way to get hardware a proper FM engine in a hardware instrument at this price point. It does have some flaws, which we'll get into, but if you want to get your foot in the door of a hardware FM instrument and you don't want to spend a lot of cash, this might be for you. Also, it makes pretty good cat sounds. Alright, so I like to start with the positive news before the bad news. So let's get into the things I like about this guy. Right out the gate, especially for a beginner or someone who doesn't want to spend hundreds of hours understanding how something works, it's a pretty simplistic device and offers not a lot of dials on the front, but the dials it does offer give you basically most of what you need to make sound. So for example, let's find a relatively normal patch here. These are not the default ones. Just fix my DAW here so I don't get it echoed back in my ear. So we have this sound, and right away let's just record something simple into the sequencer. So I'm going to clear it out and we'll hit record and we'll hit play, and we're going to have an empty sequence, but let's just put something down so I don't have to worry about playing something while I explain. Alright, not the best work, but it works. So you can easily transpose the octaves with this guy here. And you can use the velocities. So what velocity is how hard you're hitting the keys. And this thing doesn't have any velocity sensitivity on the ribbon keyboard here, but you can hear this patch responds quite drastically to velocity. So if I turn the velocity down, it's like basically somebody feather touching the keys, versus if I turn it all the way up and someone slam that keyboard as hard as I can. And so because like I said, the ribbon keyboard has no sensors that can tell how hard you're touching it, you have to use this dial to dial in your velocity. If you're adventurous, and I encourage you to do so, and you have one of these, or you decide to buy one of these, follow the little link above. But there's a gentleman named Pagan who released unofficial firmware, and while it doesn't give you velocity on this ribbon keyboard, if you go and buy a MIDI controller, which we'll get into in a little bit, by default it doesn't support velocity via the MIDI controller with the default firmware, but Pagan has hacked it safely, I would say. I haven't heard anyone getting bricked or whatnot, but do so at your own risk. Has made his own custom firmware, which I have installed on here, that will register velocity coming in from a keyboard, so you don't have to ride this while you're playing it with a keyboard. If you actually have a physical keyboard that can connect in via the MIDI slot here, you'll be able to get velocity over keys, which is a really nice feature. And one of the main things that kind of sucks with the default firmware is not having velocity with FM is not experiencing the full FM. So it's a really essential fix that Pagan has given us here. But on to the other things on this control. So with FM synthesis, you have modulators and carriers. So if you're familiar with subtractive synthesis, the way I like to think of it is a carrier is kind of like the pure oscillator that makes a sound wave that's generating the sound directly to the synth that goes into your ear. The modulators are waves similar to the carrier, but you don't hear them. Those waves go into the carrier and affect the sound wave of the carrier, thus affecting the sound. So the way FM works is, in this case, in most synths, they'll have a number of they'll have a number of operators. This one has 6, and a number of algorithms, the way those operators can be assigned and affect each other. In this case, you have 32 different ways to organize those 6 operators available to make different sounds. But if you don't want to dig into that level, the Volca FM makes it pretty simple for you, because it will just tell you, hey, you can adjust all the modulators' attack values here and their decay values here and all your carriers, and you can also play around with the LFO. And depending on how the patch is set up and which algorithm you're using, they will do different things. But let's just try it with what we have set up here. So, we seem to have a pretty quick attack and a long decay. So let's say we just want to get kind of that dung and not much decay. Well, let's just kill all the decay on the carrier and see what happens. Well, I just got a click now, so I need to give it a bit more. And maybe it's the modulator that's screwing us up with that, but you can see how quickly still, you can play around, and let's make sure the attack is down so it hits right away. Maybe we'll get a bit more decay. No, sounds like. So you can play around with those to dial in your sound quite rapidly. So even though you only have 32 patches on here, by playing around with the carrier attack and the modulator attack and decays, and also by shifting algorithms, you can see that the algorithms themselves, by shifting algorithms, you can have quite a drastic impact on the way a patch sounds, to the point it doesn't even sound like the original patch. And then if you ever want to go back, don't worry, none of this sticks as soon as you cycle between patches. So if you make a monster like I did there, it's easy to kill it. Or let's say if you really like what you've done, it's like, yeah, I'm looking for that. You can just save that over top of it, and so when I go back, it's my new patch. So there is a menu you can go into, and you can have this nice reference card, and I don't blame you if you never want to do so. Maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, because one of the things I don't like about it is making patches on there. I'll save it, because I want to talk positive about this thing right now. I don't want to bitch about it, but you got to hear one little quick patch there. But I really do like, for such a cheap device, the sound you can get out of this thing. And in fact, I was playing around with some MIDI tracks last night and a couple of pedals, and was able to crank out a fun rendition of the Duke Nukem theme song. And yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that. And in fact, over the last couple of weeks, I've just been sitting out with this thing a number of nights and making my own compositions and playing around with MIDI tracks like that. And I've been having a hell of a lot of fun with this thing. And to be honest, being my first synth, it kind of got dusty for a little bit. In fact, it ended up back in the closet there for a little bit. And I pulled it back out, and it's fun. It's definitely not without its flaws, but it's a fun instrument, and it can do a lot, and I really like it. So the sound is not bad, and especially for the price point of $200 Canadian, there isn't another hardware FM synth out there that's near that price point. So it's kind of got that going for it as well. It's the cheapest hardware you can get. And like, all right, I was talking about Pagan's custom firmware a bit beforehand there around the velocity. The only other thing that's a really killer feature for it with me, it adds a bunch of different MIDI notes and messages that can come in and be supported, which is cool. But the big thing for me is without that custom firmware, I haven't tended to build a lot of patches on this because it's such a pain in the ass. There is some computer assisted web apps that can help you there, but I've even gotten more lazier than that, or not that that's lazy, but I just load in old DX7 patches and play around with them on here a little bit and use them as I see fit with my silly little Bobby Blues thing I've been doing. Anyway, if you don't have Pagin's custom firmware, I found about 60% of them would get you the actual what they sound kind of like. With Pagin's custom firmware, he's added a mode that accepts those patches in and loads them into the Volca FM a little bit differently. That pretty much makes, I would say, 95% of them work, or at least sound what they're supposed to sound like, between Dexed and coming to here. Dexed is a free VST virtual instrument that can be used instead of this, but it's a VST. And then I guess the other things I like about this is its size. Runs on batteries, which is handy. So if you want to do a mobile rig, or like when I messed my leg up in the summer, I didn't take this one specifically. I actually took the keys, but it's great if you're going to be waiting somewhere for a while, and it's you don't want to carry a whole big rig of you. You can just take one of these and a pair of headphones, and it will give you a way to waste a couple hours while you wait to see the doctor or whatnot, which is nice. And the ARP, I thought, is pretty. It's not the most amazing thing in the world, but it's quite. It does mostly 90% of what you need on this device for. It's a nice little bonus, and especially when you're not a master keyboardist or you're learning, it's nice to lean on a sequencer and an ARP to get where you need to go. So I've kind of sound like a Korg salesman thus far with this review. It is generally a very good product in my opinion, but there is some things that I don't like about it. Number one is going to be the sound. Now, like I said, I like the sound before. What I don't like is that there's not a proper output. There's only, in this case, you can see here, headphone output, right? So there's no proper quarter-inch outputs left or right. The only output way to get sound out of this thing is via a headphone jack. In this case, it's a cable I have that connects to a headphone jack that goes to outputs for left and right quarter-inch, which you may want to buy. I'll get into that a little bit later for add-ons. And also, there's only MIDI in, so MIDI out. If you write something clever on the sequencer, well, it's stuck on here. You're not going to be able to get that out to your DAW or wherever you want to go, or record those MIDI notes anywhere. You can accept MIDI notes in, which is nice, but you be aware that's a limitation too. I've been pledging how great the price is, but with that price, you're losing some basic key features like those. And the other thing about the sound, while I do like the general sound, I don't like all the static on the line. So here's a quick example. Where I basically plug the FM into my phone. I'm playing a quick little couple notes, stopping, and then you're hearing the static sound, and then I'm unplugging the same cable and the same audio interface into my phone and playing something off of the Korg Oscillator app on my phone, which you'll hear has no static, is perfectly clean when I plug it in. And I even stopped the song a little bit, and you can hear there's nothing going on in the background. So this thing is loud and noisy compared to my other instruments or even my phone. The main limitation with this specific instrument is that it can only play 3 voices. And what does that mean? Now let's see. This is actually a good patch to demonstrate it on. So you can see if I play a chord, I can only play 3 notes at once. So there's note 1, note 2, note 3. But if I try to add something else in, it steals from the other notes. So let me just give me a sec here. Make a better example. I'm going to play a bunch of low ones. Steal from high. See how that last note got caught off there? So let's go back. Let me demonstrate that again. See, even here, the note is still having that long cutoff, but if I push too many at once, right? See, it chops them off. It starts stealing the notes. It's called note stealing. And with this, when you only have 3 voices in an FM instrument, it's really easy to get into playing something cool that you like. See, it's like, oh yeah, that sounded kind of cool and progressive. But then if you make one misstep and start hitting too many notes at once, you're gonna just have a real sharp cut off one of those notes and drops off, which is rather jarring to the listener. So with 3 voices, it's super easy to do. And in fact, some pads and whatnot that you want to be a bit more complex require more than 3 voices. So you won't be able to do super complex pads that have a whole bunch of shifting sounds and draining out or whatnot just with this alone. For $200, that may or may not matter to you, but for some, they may want to shell out a bit more money and get something like the Yamaha Reface EX, which is $400, comes with a proper keyboard, and I think can have up to 32 voices. We'll get into some comparisons later on, but that's where you gotta think before you just jump right into the Volca pool. Is if you are wanting to try these out and you do like them, well, then you're going to quickly run into limitations with them, and which is either going to make you figure out how to be creative to work around those limitations artistically, or you may just spend another $400 on a better instrument or more, depending on what you're looking for, and then these get pushed to the closet. Anyway, that aside, one thing I like to do, and one thing I like to go with hardware, is I like to make patches. But on the Volca FM, unless you want to do some very simple adjustment of other people's patches, the editor is not friendly to use. So to get into the editor, you have to hit this edit button here. And you can see on this card, which you'll want to have out, is basically there. You can see where your operator is, what parameter you're editing for that operator. And so for example, let's see if I remember how to switch around in here. Nope, that was not the right button. Is it this guy? So I can switch between operators with this guy here. And where can I actually? Sorry, I should have practiced this before. Here we go. Is the program, parameter. That would help if I actually learned to read. It says parameter right here. Is I can switch between parameters for that operator or this. And I can go into each of the 6 operators and manually adjust them on here and save it and try to play while I do that to figure out what I'm doing. I've never done that once, and I don't envision I ever will. So to me, it's not a realistic interface for me to build complex FM sounds on. What I do is I get lazy and I grab old DX7 sounds and slap them on here and play around with them until I get them where I want and have fun with them. Now there is online apps and sites that will let you build sound specifically for the Volca FM in a much nicer format, but in that case I'd much rather just work with a VST, and I don't enjoy just my way my brain works, which might be stupid for some, but for me at least, I don't enjoy building patches on the computer. I like building them physically on the device, and that's why I would pay extra money to own a hardware device, is to actually do the sound design directly on the hardware device, because I don't enjoy doing it very much on the computer, which if I did, I'd save a hell of a lot of money for myself, but that's just me and I'm weird. Alright, what else did I miss? So those are my huge things. Is the line noise. Well, you can get around it. It's not the worst thing in the world. Oh man, I wish there was just a couple. If there was a couple more voices on this thing beyond the 3, it would be so much better. It's still a very awesome tool with the 3 voices, but it is a hell of a limitation. And I'm not sure how on a device this small you would actually be able to make an interface that would make modifying FM easy without a complex touchscreen or OS underneath it. That would probably charge more than the $200 device price point. So, but I'll still bitch about it. I don't like building. In fact, I don't even try building sounds directly on this thing. One other thing is the chorus effect is nice, but there is absolutely no control on the device with it directly. Besides turning it off and on, which makes it a little less useful. With Pagin's custom firmware, though, you can modify chorus settings via MIDI messages, which gives you a little bit more of a way to play around with that. Also, the other thing that is annoying, you can plug a DC power adapter into it. But it does not come with one, so that will be an extra $20-$30 or whatever on top of it if you don't want to be replacing the 6 AA batteries that require to run it. Now it does come with batteries, so good show there, and they'll last you about 8 to 10 hours, I find. So they won't burn through them super fast, but when you start playing around these things, 8 to 10 hours can go by fast. And in fact, I'd recommend you buy an AC adapter unless you want to be buying Amazon batteries or whatever nonstop. All right, so before you drop this guy into your cart and buy it, a couple alternatives you might want to look into. Definitely check out Dexed, and you're going to want to download it and install it on your computer anyways, even if you buy this guy. It's a virtual DX7 that you can play, a VST that you can play on your desktop. It's also the way you're probably going to import DX7 sounds into this guy. So definitely download Dexed, check it out, because it's a proper DX7, or it's probably a proper FM synth that mimics a DX7, and you might be happy enough like that where you don't need to go ahead and buy hardware. Now, if you've played with VSTs before and you don't like them, you want a hardware instrument, but you're looking for your first synthesizer, I would suggest before you buy the Volca keys or the Volca FM, look into the Volca sample. Why? Well, it plays samples, so you can use it as a drum machine. You can save FM samples, like FM sounds like bells or pads or whatever you like, to the sample, and then play all those sounds on one device. And it's going to cover a whole bunch of bases, and it's a great little device, and it's my favorite Volca. But if specifically you're looking for an FM synth and a hardware one, before you buy the FM, check out the Reface DX. It's twice the price as the Volca FM, but it comes with a proper mini key keyboard, which is a nice bonus. And additionally, it can allow you to play up to 32 voices, so you're not going to run into that 3-voice limitation on the Volca FM. The only downside that I can think of is it only has 4 operators and 12 algorithms, but that's more than enough to get most of the FM sounds you're going to want to get out anyways. It's not that big of a headache. Also, if you really want the traditional FM sound, you can still buy DX7s out there used. You may be continuously fixing it up. You may run into problems with it, but if you want the real thing, They're out there and they're still available to buy. I think they're around 600, 700 bucks Canadian. I see them for locally, maybe a bit more these days. Other newer hardware, the Digitone. It's an Electron device. It's a really fun engine to play around with, but it's more of a brain unit where it has a really kick-ass sequencer, and you can use that kick-ass sequencer to control the Digitone and 4 other instruments over MIDI. So if you're looking for a master control and an FM synth, it's not a bad choice. I like mine. Alternatively, if you're looking for an old school video game sound, you can get a Mega FM, which uses Sega's Mega Drive, I think it was Sega Genesis sound chip in there. Also, there is a VST for that one too, called RYM 2612 if you Google that. So there is VST options if you really want that chiptune Genesis sound. And also, Korg just released a new synthesizer called the Op6 you might want to look into. It's going to be about 4 times, if not more, the price of the Volca FM, but it's their flagship FM synthesizer. So before you go ahead and pull the trigger on this guy, check it out. And the other thing I'll just say with the Volcas is, yes, they're cheap, yes, they're easy to get into, and yes, you're not going to feel it too bad in the wallet. But what you might feel bad in the wallet is when you get one and you hit the walls of that 3-voice or the limitations of this device, and then you start looking at some of that other gear. You might be like me and buy a Digitone, and if I had just bought the Digitone, I might not be doing this review right now because I might not have the FM. So they're fun, they're useful, but they're cheap. But how cheap is cheap when you get your toes wet and want more and end up buying the more expensive advanced instrument anyways? That's where, if I were to do it over again, if I could go back in time, I'd probably buy the Reface DX versus this. Not that I'm unhappy with this purchase, but for double the price, I think you get a lot more functionality of those 32 voices and the ability to modify your own sounds right on the device. I don't have a Reface DX, but from what I hear, it's not a bad system to work with. So for those 2 reasons alone, if I could do it over again, I'd probably do it. But I don't regret buying an FM either. All right, so you made it through all this. You're saying, you know what? I don't care. I like the Volca FM. I'm gonna buy it. Awesome. A couple add-ons you may want to look at getting with your FM. My first suggestion is a delay pedal. So you know how I bitched about the 3 voices and how the note stealing can really bite away at you? Check out this video above. It's me playing around with this guy and a bit crush pedal. But what the nice thing about the delay is with those 3 voices is with the delay pedal, and you can buy a cheap one. I think I got this one for 30 bucks Canadian on sale. It's going to mask that note stealing a bit more if you put a big delay. Now you're going to have a delay effect on your sound, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And adding a delay can be fun too. But the key thing for me, why I think it's a winner with the FM, is with that voice stealing, that with those 3 notes only. If you do make a mistake, well, maybe the delay will save your baking by kind of masking that quick cutoff of the note, because the delay is going to keep playing it a little bit till it fades out more realistically than being hard chopped by the voice stealing. Now, if you're not going to be wanting to build patches on here, which I wouldn't blame you if you're not going to want to keep this card in your wallet, and you're not going to want to just stick with the presets on this guy. Now, to be noted, these are none of the presets. What you're going to want is one of these, and I recommend, is this Roland UM-ONE Cable. And why I recommend this is for loading in those DX7 patches from my computer. This is the only damn cable that will actually let me do it from Dexed. I've tried to do it through a cheaper MIDI cable, and really all it is it's just a USB that you throw into your computer, and then there's a MIDI in and out. But in this case, you plug the MIDI in one to the MIDI in on the Volca, and then there's some magic in this box here that will let the MIDI SysX messages flow through properly, where I can actually take the patches out of Dexed and save them on the FM. I've tried it on my audio interface. I've tried it on a cheaper USB MIDI cable. This one I think was around 50-ish bucks. I tried it on like a $20 one. This is the only one I've had any success with of loading in DX7 patches from Dexed from my computer to the FM. So if that's something you're going to want to do, budget yourself an extra $50 Canadian to pick up one of these Roland UM-ONE cables. Try your luck on something cheaper if you like, but at least in my personal experience with 3 different devices, this is the only one that's worked. And last but not least, you're going to want to get yourself one of these too. Like I mentioned, the headphone jack is the only audio out, so you can get the 3.5 millimeter, I think, headphone jack, 2 proper 1/4 inch left-right outs. And now in this case, most of the Volcas play out monos on so just, but in this case, the chorus effect will use the left and right stereo out, and the Volca sample, I believe, does as well. I'm not sure about the other ones. So get yourself one of those, because it will come in handy when you want to throw it into a proper mixer or into an audio interface. And yeah, the only other thing I would recommend is you're probably going to want a proper keyboard unless you're going to want to play on the ribbon key for the rest of your life. So I've had good luck with my Arteria Keystep over the last year. It's the first thing I bought after getting the Volca FM because I wanted a proper keyboard. It also comes with an ARP that gives you some options there, and a sequencer, so you can actually set up a 64 note sequence on the Keystep that gives you a bit more sequencing power directly, and also has some handy little things like chord mode. If you're following my channel, you've probably seen my tutorial on this, but I'll link it anyways. And anyways, that's about it. So it's hard to go wrong with a $200 hardware FM synth, but just be aware of some of the downsides getting in. If you bought it, I think you can validate your purchase. It's a nice. It definitely punches above its weight. It has some severe limitations, but they're not very severe when you consider that there's nothing else in a $200 Canadian price range for a hardware synth. In fact, it's good. So definitely, if you like what you see, I think you can safely go ahead and pull the trigger on it. But if any of those limitations or downsides make you go, I don't blame me either. So I think the key question is if you're brand new, what level of money do you want to put in it? You might not want to spend, 400 Canadian to $1,000 Canadian on a bit of an upgraded device, because you might buy it and it might sit in your corner and dust over in a couple of months, and you go, well, that was a waste of money. Maybe you're able to say, I can $200, whatever. If I don't like it, you get my gist. But I would say just caution that approach, because that's what I did. And if I were to do it again, I would probably go for the Reface DX. But if you're able to to throw a couple more $100 on your experiment and get away with it, it may be the way to go. But like I said, also is I don't regret getting this guy either, and I think it's well worth the $200 they want for it, especially with Pagin's custom firmware of getting the velocity over MIDI and more DX7 patch compatibility. It's not bad, and I don't regret buying it. And if you choose to go that way, I think you'll be happy to. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.